Welcome everybody, it is week 12 here at the Overwatch League, and we still got 2 more matches left to go. Gonna be kicking off the day with the Mayhem taking on the Uprising in a match, Jake, where the Mayhem looking to prove a little bit of dominance.
Definitely. Boston, they've had a real struggle of a season this time around. It hasn't been what they had hoped for. A lot of teams, I think, taking wins off Boston. If you think back, their only win was that knockdown dragout against Houston, and that was at a time when Houston was really struggling. So, if you're a Boston Uprising fan, you really got to be pulling for them now. These players, I think they've got the individual talent, but it's yet to see if they can actually bring it together. And, it's getting to the point where you're going to be eliminated from playoff contention if things keep going this direction.
Both teams here looking to make their mark, but I couldn't agree more with Boston, where if there's any time to pull out of the tailspin, it's definitely going to be now. But shifting gears a little bit to Florida and their roster, one thing these teams both have in common, Jake, is that both these teams generally run with the same 6.
Yeah, exactly. I think with Florida, we saw BQB and Saya swap playtime for the first part of the season, but I just think it wasn't as successful as just locking in BQB. I think he's been a real superstar this season. Saya, has always been a completely insane player on the Widowmaker, but I think more than his skill changing, I think it's just that hero has not really been seen too much playtime this season compared to the last 2, where it was really dominant for so long.
Meanwhile, taking a look at the Boston roster, well, I think Reinforce said it best on Watchpoint, where there is no surprise here for Boston. This is really the only 6 that Boston can run at the moment. And, I mean, there are some bright spots on the roster, but they haven't quite put it all together.
Yeah, definitely. This is a team that, I'd hoped to see succeed with so many rookies, but just too much turmoil for them so far. I mean, this Florida could be a team that they can upset, but, Florida, they're so unpredictable. Sometimes they'll have great games, taking impressive series off of some of the best teams in the league, and other times they look a little bit out of place, look a little bit out of sorts. So Boston, they better be hoping that it's the weak version of the Florida Mayhem this week, because I just don't see them getting this win otherwise, unless they've really leveled up their game over the past week of practice. It's possible, but at the same time, I just feel like they're going to be the underdogs for a long time until they really turn the season around.
Well, the first map we're going to be kicking things off on here today, it is going to be Nepal. And Jake, just going a little bit in depth here. If you're Boston and right now you're struggling for wins, does that mean the pressure is off? Or at some point does the pressure build back on going, when are we going to get another win?
I don't think the pressure abates at all if you're a player in this situation. I think it pretty much just gets worse and worse and worse. And that's not what you want to hear if you're a Boston fan. But I just think from the player perspective, it's the honest truth. No player likes losing. No player can even accept it. You just feel like you're not achieving your job. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. So it's a really tough thing to deal with mentally and emotionally. And the challenge has to be that you have to take those losses and then turn it around somehow and somehow change the momentum. And that's the real test of a player, of a team. Someone's got to step up, be that leader that the team needs to take them forward. And maybe, who knows, maybe this is their week. Let's find out.
Yeah, and one interesting thing about that, I'll go back to an old story I used to tell about Season 1 with the Shanghai Dragons in the inaugural season, where once a team loses enough games in a row, teams start playing harder against you because they don't want to be the team to give you a win.
Exactly, and I think Boston might already be suffering from that just a little bit. But with this week, with the reality of the season with hero pools and everything, you're preparing for every week aggressively, probably maybe even more so than in the past, where you're playing the same thing for a long time, so it's less of a week to week to week, and you're more looking at the meta and a long form trend. In this meta, I mean, it doesn't really matter if you're one of the weaker teams in the league. Teams still going to put a ton of resources and time into preparing the hero pool, deciding what strategy they think is the best. So Boston, they're not going to have any free wins, I think, this season. The league is just playing at too high of a level for that. They're going to need to earn this one.
We'll take a look here on the North American side. One thing we've been seeing a lot, not as much D.Va, a lot more Zarya, and both teams running out here with the Ryan Zarya to kick things off. Yeah,
BQB is going to favor the Reaper, sim teleporting his team in, but both teams taking the contest on this high ground. It's going to be up to Jerry and Halo to get some picks off here. Halo starts it off.
Yachi gets caught early, but Fusion's a little bit deep. Both teams 5-on-5. Jerry on the outskirts right now needs to find something soon, as the rest of the Mayhem, they're utilizing the Reaper. They're keeping the main front line, and Jerry just gets rushed down. You don't usually see a Reaper take out a McCree like that.
I think it was all about the start of the fight. You just saw Karayan and Gargoyle moving out so aggressively on top mid, supported by their teammates, but BQB is even ice-walled off, and the team just moved forward fearlessly, took that aggressive position on the high ground. Jerry's sitting back a little bit, poking away, but if he doesn't find a kill there, his team just gets overwhelmed, and that's exactly how that mid-fight goes. Now Boston's in the unenviable position of retaking on Nepal. Looks like they're going to come through kitchen, but Karayan is very prepared for this.
And Florida, they're going to try and take the fight as early as possible, especially with the Reaper. Karayan just working around the outskirts here. Jerry already down. Karayan dropping the shatter around the corridor. Ends up giving his life, but the rest of it still goes pretty well for the Mayhem.
Yeah, fighting in this tiny corridor, really a struggle for Boston. The players on the Florida side, they can just dip in and out of that small contested room. If, you know, they go in, put some pressure on, cycle out, get heals. Gangnam Jim constantly on the high ground, never at risk. And, you know, on the flip side, Boston, they're all trapped together in there. They cannot leave the room. It's pretty much all in or die, and in that case, they die. Great work by Yaki and Karayan to contest that choke. If Boston gets out, you could see a very different fight, but in those close-range engagements, Florida has a big advantage.
Boston needs to get this next engage sooner rather than later. Gargoyle very close to the grab time. BQB going in for the aggressive flank, gets caught by Jerry, and just barely able to walk away with his life. Boston, they use the opportunity here to move on forward. Fusion's getting frozen out, has a chance for the shatter. Puts Ryan on the ground. Boston looking for a way in. The Graviton knocked. Oh, Karayan got a shatter fire strike towards the very end, and that's going to seal it.
Great work by the supports of the Florida Mayhem there. Karayan took so much punishment, taking the grab, then getting slept, then getting shattered. Just chain CC onto Karayan, but he doesn't go down there, even despite being right next to all the members of the Boston Uprising. Because Florida's constantly fighting in that low ground pit area, Gangnam Jin has a perfect situation there. He's just sitting on the high ground, throwing nades. This position is so dominant for him. As long as his team fights right in front of him, he's always going to get more value than Myeonbong.
Well, the Uprising, one final opportunity to bring this back. They have the Blizzard at the very least. Probably going to use it early in the fight. BQB, though, against the flank! 3 for BQB! Just immediately removing Boston from the fight, and that is about as decisive as a round can get.
Man, that's a fearless reroll from BQB. Just teleports in, drops the ult, and gets a 3K. Yeah, you know, I don't hate the taunt there from BQB. You got to respect it. That's just a complete domination from Florida Mayhem. If the series keeps going this way, it's going to be a 3-0. I mean, mid-fight looked just really dominant from Florida. They moved out aggressively. They knew what they wanted to do, and they executed quickly. And then from there on out, it's just fights in the choke until the map's over. I mean, BQB had the big ult to close it out, but the previous fights were really all about teamwork, and that's where Florida just had Boston beat. Now Boston going to show the Symmetra on the start, maybe trying to get a quick move onto this high ground position. Both teams actually going to have the Symmetra, so it should be even here.
Just a general vibe of disrespect coming up from Florida, where, okay, BQB found some great opportunities, but seeing a Reaper get that aggro, it's not something that happens every day, Jake.
Oh, and you know, I actually really like the comp that the Florida Mayhem are fielding here. They deal so much spam damage. If Brusen cannot get very high energy very quickly, it's going to be a very, very tough fight. Jerry and Myeonbong totally isolated by the ice wall from Yaki, and looks like the Florida are leaning up there on the side.
Jerry's looking for angles on the back, but right now, not really finding much of it, and the fight's already over, so if you're going to run the Ashe, you need to get value off of it, and I don't even think Jerry really had much in his sights to begin with to even look to shoot.
No, I think the idea from Jerry is to play the Ashe in like a mirror match, but because Gargoyle is on this Sigma, and Yaki, by the way, is all the way in the spawn, hunting down Brusen. Oh my word, that would be so painful if he fell there, but maybe Florida going to pay a little bit for this push, but just going to be Karayan's shield that goes down pretty much.
Florida just doing whatever they want right now, and you know, it's unfair to say, oh, Jerry just find a pickoff there. I mean, most of Boston just went in and got annihilated early in the fight now. They're going to look for a way in. Split off to the degree by Yaki, the early ball. Boston moving over, and Color Hex already picked off. Gargoyle off the flank. Nasty stuff coming in from Gargoyle, and Uprising, they're stuck back to spawn, and Florida's chasing him right there.
Florida is going into the spawn doors right now. Oh no, don't die here. Myeonbong falling in the spawn door. I mean, this is a little bit of BM from the Florida Mayhem. I mean, it make it work with these pickoffs, but it just feels like Boston has no potential in these team fights. They're coming into the choke. You've got Karayan on one side, Gargoyle on the other. This perfect 180 split on the choke. Boston is just getting picked apart. They need some ults to deal with this, but all they have is the nano boost. That could be what they need, but Karayan watching around the corner with the third person.
He's waiting for it. Oh no, Fusions, you don't want to be here. Jerry's already down. And Karayan waiting. Do you drop the shatter for just extra gratuitous violence? Do you do it? Fusions is down to no. You wait, but you go back over the spawn where, right now, Jake, Florida's not just breaking the body, they're breaking the spirit.
This is a brutal domination, I have to say. I mean, even that fight looked great from a team fight ult perspective, but not only that, BQB also just picks off Jerry at the start of the fight for free. Now coming up on 80%, I mean, even if Boston gets a good engagement in this choke point, probably they're going to have to send Halo forward just to keep the point contested. There's no easy way to get a contest on a point besides the Lucio, and even that is risky against players as sharp as BQB and Yaki. Florida, though, giving a little bit more respect this time, respecting that grab freeze combo. It is really devastating. I mean, to be fair, this should be a team fight victory just because of those ults.
You would think Boston, final opportunity to get anything coming. Color Hex finds an arrow to the head courtesy of BQB, so Boston already down one. Bruson gonna try and equalize here with the grab. The beat though out, so's the Immortality Field. Fusions goes for the Shatter, gets nothing on the other end, and Florida just shrugging it off. Boston in a real tough spot here. Bruson finds BQB towards the end, but it's not enough. Crying, easy cleanup, and with Boston getting the point for a moment, it's about to flip back the way of Florida, and I don't think Boston's coming back in.
They're going to try. Nice boop off, though, by Fusions. Keeps this potentially in contest, but Mail doesn't even get out. Color Hex falling too quickly. He does get it out, but it's a desperation throw from the pit. Doesn't really get any value on point, and just so much dominance from Florida here. This is the map.
Overtime about to tick away. Last little bit of delay coming in from Boston, but I'd say it's looking for a last fight, but arguably Boston never had a fight. Florida, unreal dominance against the Uprising. What more can you say?
Yeah, I said Boston was hoping that Florida would have one of their weak days, one of their off days, maybe playing a little bit uncoordinated or individually weak, but they are not getting any weakness out of the Mayhem right now. Mayhem looking really sharp, really polished, from the mid-fights to the post-fights executions to the ult economy. You know, even in that last fight, you think, okay, yeah, they had the grab freeze on the side of Boston, but because Florida plays far back, splits around the map, just puts their snipers in high ground positions, BQB is able to pick off Color Hex, and they lose the other half of their grab freeze combo. And, you know, without the Blizzard, that's your most crucial ultimate, arguably, in the composition that Boston's running. They absolutely needed to get the flip, needed to get that combo off successfully. And I think also Florida just outcomped them there on Sanctum. I think on Sanctum, the Hanzo gets so much value, long-range spamming, doesn't have to really commit. There's so many great positions for Hanzo to spam from, and at the same time, you're also running a Sigma and a Batiste, so not only are you out-spamming the enemy team with your DPS, but you're also playing tanks and supports that actually continue to enhance that game plan, maximize the spam value. So, I mean, the irony of the whole situation is that even though they're playing a spam comp, they still win the close-range brawl on mid. Jerry and Myunbong isolated by Yaki's Maywall there, so you can't fault Florida for anything here. I mean, this is a perfect round. I mean, yes, they give up the second point, or they give up the Sanctum cap for, 15%, but it's all over at that point. So, perfect round, perfect map. Boston looking really, really weak right now.
Yeah, it's been a tough go for Boston, and this is normally a throw. We'll say, hey, we'll see if Boston can be right back. Right now, we're watching Florida just steamroll over, but excellence is in motion. I'm curious how Florida continues it on. We'll be back in a break.
The Overwatch League is brought to you by Pringles Wavy. Big crunch, big flavor. And by Zip Chair Game, the official chair supplier of the Overwatch League.
Welcome back, guys. We've got some great news. T-Mobile customers can score $30 to the Overwatch League shop. Be sure to download the T-Mobile Tuesdays app now and redeem your loot on April 28th. But, coming back into it, of course, it is Florida v. Boston, and so far, Jake, it has been a tough road for Boston, but Florida, on the other hand, Florida's looking really polished, and this is what you need to show if you're looking to become a top team and break out of the mid-range.
Yeah, definitely. Boston Uprising, I mean, they've been a bit of a bellwether, but it's less of a question of can you win, but rather how do you win? And unfortunately, that's just been the story so far this season for the Boston Uprising. Feels like they just haven't found their footing. You know, that first map, it's hard to really point out to anything that worked in their favor. It felt like every single fight, Mayhem was in control, pretty much as close to a perfect Koth map as you can get. 100-0 on the first round, and then second round yielding point. But, I mean, what's really telling is that by the time Boston caps the point, it's fully accepted by Florida. I mean, Florida's just accepting, oh yeah, have the point, we don't care. They use all their ults just to cap the point, and by then they're still dropping players. So Florida's in control of that fight the entire time. They gave the point intentionally just to make sure that they could keep as many players alive as possible, guarantee the long-term fight win. So from Florida, that's just textbook execution. That's pretty intelligent stuff. That's what you want to see out of them, because not every team knows that, you know, oh, we can give up the point, you know, in this, since we already have 99, as long as we guarantee the fight win, nothing else matters. 10% for Boston doesn't matter, totally irrelevant. So they wisely give up the point, but, you know, that just means that Boston, yeah, they capped the point once, but it really wasn't as much their doing as Florida just allowing it to happen while they pick apart the back line, while they win the fight elsewhere. So Florida Mayhem looking really strong. You know, Boston's going to have to mount a next level defense coming into this next map type.
Well, next map type is going to be Assault to kick things off, and I have to wonder what Boston has in the tank, if anything, because you go back and you look at what we just witnessed. Florida was just outplaying on every single level, whether it be early pickoffs onto opposing DPS. You know, you think about the back and forth we saw between Carpe and Baby Bay yesterday. There was no back and forth here. It was simply Color, Hex, and Jerry being driven into the ground. You look at the tank game where Cryan was having the run of it versus Fusions. Any matchup you look at here, Boston was struggling. So for me, okay, the new map type, that's interesting, but it's also just, on some level, this is the team needs to pick itself up, because across the board, Florida was simply outclassing Boston. Yeah,
you know, I think it was a bit of an outcomping. I think Florida played better around their Reaper than Boston did around their McCree on the first map. And then on the second map, I think the Sigma Batiste is just, and the Hangzhou, they're just getting so much value on a map like Sanctum. Really wide open, lot of range, very easy for Sigma, you know, to poke from flanks, to play high grounds, get value, spam it out. And great chokeholds as well. When they're, without even playing this Arya, they're still winning that Rhine trade because the team is just spamming so effectively. Fusions can't really drop his shield at all. So, I mean, you got to give props to Florida. They're keeping the pressure very, very heavy on Boston. So I think it's pretty much on Boston to change things up here. If Florida just keep playing the way they played that last map, I find it hard to imagine Boston takes a map in this series.
And let me ask you this. I mean, Boston's playing pretty close to what we think is the meta, at least for what we can classify as the NA scrim bubble, right? And is there any benefit at some point to just going wildly off meta, sort of channeling your inner Chengdu and seeing what works? Because when playing things a little bit more standard, it feels like Boston they're not getting anything done.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is on a map like Paris, it's pretty rough to go off meta. I mean, you could play a hero like Pharah on first point and, you know, get the comp that Boston's running. They wouldn't have really great answers to it. They don't have a D.Va. They don't have, pretty much it's only Ana and Mei that are going to be shooting up and poking that away at that Pharah. So she could get a lot of value running a comp like that. But the problem is, yes, you're most likely going to cap first pretty quick with that strat, but it just doesn't scale into second point. And, you know, Florida can just give up first, build some ultimates up, and, you know, if Boston has to swap all their ults, drop their heroes going into second point, it's not even worth it in the first place. So on a map like Assault, or on a map type like Assault, you kind of have to play a comp that works the whole map through, give yourself that snowball potential, keep your ultimates in play. So we'll see if Jerry can do it on the McCree this time.
What does right on Jerry here, too? When you're running the McCree, you need to get pickoffs from afar, and Florida, they're not giving them the breathing room. They just immediately dive in. Cryan leads the way, Youngbung out of the fight immediately, and it's just over. There was no time for Jerry to even sit back and find a pickoff there. Florida got the perfect engagement.
It's really nice setup play. Pretty much the whole team having impact there. Chris first, hiding in the corner. He boops everyone out from Boston so they can't make the rotation as quick as they like. And then Karayan just comes in swinging with the Zarya bubble coming out from Gargoyle. That's pretty textbook gameplay from the whole side of Florida, but it's just exactly what they need in the circumstance. And Chris setting up to do it again. There's no way to clear this spot, so Boston's going to get booped every single time. And this time, BQB is also lying in wait. This could be another devastating rush for Florida.
Florida still making adjustments midway through, and again the collapse comes through. The shatter on top. ColorX not going to be really feeling too good after that one, and Boston again just completely out-initiated. It's not even a fight here, Jake, realistically.
And I love the little subtle change up there from Florida Mayhem. You know, they do basically the same play as before, but this time BQB is actually lying in wait in the corner. And if Boston is expecting that, it could be a big risk. You know, he could get insta-flash, but because he didn't do it the first round, Boston just said, oh, we'll run it back. But honestly, for Boston, it's like, what did you expect to really be different there? I mean, Chris is going to go for that play time and time again. Looks like this time maybe he's respecting a little bit. I feel like he could make it work a third time, to be honest, but we'll see. Maybe Boston, yep, they're going to take a different rotation this time. Nano onto BQB, though.
He goes to the other side, see if the tank decent, but BQB thrown onto the ground. Decent opening confusions, but it's still not going to be enough. You put a few people on the ground, it doesn't matter when everyone else is just getting surrounded on the outside. And I just feel like we're watching crash test simulations right now. Like, how safe is a Florida vehicle versus Boston? And right now, very safe.
Yeah, this Reaper is just getting so much done. Jerry on the McCree, I mean, he's got to make some sort of hero play to get this win, but it's so difficult with the way Florida are playing. They're instantly rushing in, always targeting the McCree aggressively. Like, BQB is always on Jerry's face, and like, Brisson has to constantly keep the Matrix on Jerry all day long, but at that point, you're committing 2 heroes. But this time, BQB gets caught. That's so crucial for Boston. This could be their...
Yaki down, went for the Blizzard, got caught, so off the flashbang of Jerry, Boston now with an opportunity to at least get point aim, but Florida still 4 up. Karayan says, no, we don't need DPS, it's fine. But Jerry works to the outskirts. Jerry making a difference. They force out the beat from Florida. Florida actually just beat just the sort of dive on over, and Gargoyle just turns back, deals with Jerry. But the Uprising, they have spawn advantage here. You'd think they'd be able to turn this into a point cap, but I think Florida's going to go for one more go.
Yeah, it seems like they will. Yaki on the Doomfist wants to get back to this fight very, very quickly. Florida has a few ticks to give up, but they want to fight before the spawners return from Boston. Yaki with huge pick off on the Color X. So significant here.
Well, BQB's out of it, so it's now going to have to be the Yaki show, or a huge shatter from Karayan. Drop the Graviton on the 2. Still in there. Yaki for the opportunity. Yaki down, caught by the Deadeye. The Mayhem right now, perhaps they're about to give this up. Though he's down, they go over. The shatter comes in from Karayan, puts Myungbong on the ground, and the Mayhem, they're still coming back in here. The Uprising, they might be letting the Mayhem take the point back.
Oh no, it's happening. Gargoyle's full energy. Nobody can take this guy down. He's getting spawn healed by Guangzhou Jin. Oh no, Boston, where did it all go wrong? That's not a recontest the defenders should ever really win. You have a big advantage on the spawns there, but the shatter onto Myungbong really seals the deal there from Karayan, so that's beautiful stuff. Without the Hana, Boston just can't sustain the fight anymore. Fusion's on the Wrecking Ball trying to touch, but he's just getting booped and CC'd to hell and back. Someone trying to run points Halo, but
no, they can't even get the point.
Chris. Oh, ZP. Oh, it hurts me.
I think it hurts Boston quite a bit also. Oh man, I think you said it best where that was not a recontest that should have been viable, and I think against other teams you might have seen Florida just back off and save resources for point B, but Florida just, there's a swagger going in where they're like, yeah, I mean it's 2v6, but we're doing pretty well against Boston, just go in there, see what happens. And what happened is that Florida was able to come back in, retake the point, and one way or another, it's assured us of a very quick map here on Paris. And I don't know what else to say, Jake. This is brutality.
Yeah, it had to be a bit of an error, I think, from Color Hex falling on the May. He should be one of the hardest targets with, you know, the that ice block ability. He should be one of the most difficult targets to pick off, but he goes down right at the start of that fight, and that means there's no May left click to threaten Azaria to make her feel scared, so Gargoyle pretty much just runs rampant from there on out. But even that wouldn't be enough, but Karayan somehow finds a shatter onto Myungbong. Fusions blocks himself, but it doesn't manage to block his teammate, and Karayan sweeps in to finish the kill, and that's where it all goes wrong, I think, for Boston, but it's just beautiful plays from Florida to make that happen. I think that was way beyond expectations, way beyond what you would think is possible here. Yaki even showing the Genji. I honestly don't even hate the Genji in this circumstance. I'm going to go with the May. little bit more consistent, a little bit more dominant. I mean, but at least this time Boston has defender's advantage. But Brusen on the D.Va, we'll see if he's able to keep up with Gargoyle Zarya. He's been a hugely dominant force since Brusen swapped over. So Ryan just walking in mid. They're just farming a nano right now. They do not care. They're not trying to commit on this fight. Just poking from low ground. And Boston is losing position.
We've just gone to another day at the office right now for Florida. Boston, they're going to open up. Maywall looking to split. Oh no. It's just Fusions who gets destroyed in the freezer. 6-on-5 for the Mayhem. And they just get to walk forward. Victory walk. Jerry can't do anything but backstep, eat a fire strike, and die. There's the charge. Just pile it on. Florida going to be taking Paris with ease.
All right, good map. That's 2-0 for the Florida Mayhem. A little bit quicker than expected on Paris, one of our normally longest maps in rotation. Fusions is back on the Wrecking Ball in a 1v6. We'll see if we can win it. Nope, he cannot. Nobody can do that.
Jake, if I were playing in this game and said GG afterwards as a Florida player, I'd feel like I'm being BM right now. This was not close. This was just destruction.
Yeah, BQB, I think, making the point real clear there with that taunt from Reaper. Nothing personnel, kid. Wow, what a brutal map. I thought Boston had that first point locked up for sure. I mean, it was a great first point hold to begin with from Florida. I mean, getting the clock down to 1 minute, setting themselves up for a second point defense, minimizing the time bank that Boston has to work with. But then somehow, miraculously, like 3 hero plays from Florida simultaneously. They pick off Color Hex on the Mei. They shatter and pick off Myeonbong on the Ana. Gargoyle runs rampant and finishes off the rest of the squad. And I mean, Boston's just outclassed in this matchup. Pretty simple here. I don't see, if they turn this around, I will be stunned. I mean, I've not seen 2 maps as dominant as this in a long time. So Florida Mayhem, we said they had to come prepared, and they are more than prepared for this match.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very tough ask to envision any world where this gets brought back for Boston. But hey, they got halftime to figure it out. And more importantly, as we take a break, we're going to go to Watch Point where they can make some sense of what we just saw.
The Overwatch League is brought to you by T-Mobile, helping you stay connected to what matters most. Learn about T-Mobile's COVID-19 response on T-Mobile.com. And by State Farm. For auto, home, or renter's insurance, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Welcome to our game break presented by Cheesy Grooves. CP, yeah, you asked us to make sense of this, and I'm happy to, ask Costa and Reinforce to give it their best shot, because I personally am not sure I can say much more other than one team is doing really well, the other one isn't. And, well, you can make a guess on which is which. Honestly, though, I think somewhere throughout this cast, I believe it was CP, kind of hit the nail on the head. Out initiation. Mayhem just always seem to be one step ahead. It's not like Boston is playing the wrong comps per se. It's just like Mayhem is playing and doesn't make mistakes.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what happens when you have a great coordination with your team. You trust your team to be able to engage properly. You trust your teammates to go in with you, and as a team you can initiate and get the initial advantage. And that is so crucial in a lot of these fights. If Boston Uprising hesitate for a moment and they feel like everyone's not on the same page, that when you really set yourself back, that allows the Florida Mayhem to go in and take those fights their own way, while the Boston Uprising are still scrambling for what ultimates are we going to use, what positioning are we going to take, and how are we going to execute that fight. And those small differences make all the differences when it plays out in the team fights, and you can really tell so far in this match.
You said that they're just not making mistakes. I don't think that's true. I just think that Boston isn't punishing Florida for doing anything wrong. And I think Jake made a really good point in the cast when the Florida Mayhem retook that first point. That's disrespectful to go for that retake. You don't want to use ultimates in that situation. You want to make sure you cover your second point, because if you use all your ultimates trying to retake and you lose that, which you should, then second point gets significantly harder. And there was no reason they had no right to win that fight at all. And you saw that at the start of Paris as well. They're just running in, just doing whatever they want, and Boston isn't stopping Florida from doing whatever they want. So it's just really disappointing to see Boston act like they've almost taken steps backwards than forwards during the break.
So if we're looking at this as a whole, is there anything you believe Boston can switch up to kind of, I don't know, make it work in the second half? Or do you think like this is just going to be the end of the story here?
It's very hard, right? At least try to contest what Florida Mayhem are doing. I mean, obviously, it's very hard. I'm just going to say that. It's going to be very hard for the Boston Uprising to have a chance in this, but at least you want to feel like you're playing your own game, stop hesitating, and stop taking things so very slow, because you need to take it to the Florida Mayhem. Just try to surprise them, throw them off guard, and even if you're not playing the most optimal composition, even if you're not playing the most optimal positioning, you need to make yourself comfortable first and foremost, and then you can build your team around that and your structure around that. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of other teams. Houston Outlaws, they might not play the best composition always, but they play what works for them. And the Boston Uprising, they are not playing what's for them right now. Maybe they want to play the best composition. Maybe they want to play optimally. But you gotta take small baby steps and work things out. And right now, it feels like the Boston Uprising, they're trying to do too much at the same time, and they just aren't able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the Mayhem are coming in with confidence and they're getting away with a lot. Yeah, you're right, Costa. They do make mistakes. It just doesn't look like it if it doesn't get punished like ever. So let's take a look at our crunch time presented by Cheesy Grooves. Costa, the beginning of Paris was just hard to watch. The first few fights, that was painful.
So I can forgive you walking in. They had a set strat. They want to wall. They want to walk forward. And Florida punish it by going super aggressive. Karyan just goes in almost by himself. And this is pretty much what I say, is that he's going in alone almost. He just ran in alone and just started swinging and still managed to kill Myeonbong somehow. But then, as Boston, you try the exact same strategy for the second fight. Like, of course they're going to be prepared for this in some way. Crisp does the exact same boop he did the first time. BQB's already standing there because he expects you to do the same move. If you contrast that to what the Florida Mayhem did on their attack, Florida Mayhem literally just walked in with Karyan, and then they took space and got the fight. They're not overthinking it. They're not doing it. They just need to do things together, but not six-man stacking up and just walking into a trap. So that's sort of what I mean by they're not punishing mistakes by the Florida Mayhem. Florida Mayhem isn't playing 100% perfectly at all, but if you're going to play six-man as a group, you need to punish when people get out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, we can only hope that this is the point where the Boston Uprising managed to somehow turn those confident forward moves from the Florida Mayhem and somehow punish that and turn the game around. However, it's going to be tough, as Reinforce said. For now, we're going to send it back to CP and Jake for the second half of this match. The Overwatch League is brought to you by Cheez-It Groups. Deep flavor, deep crunch. It's a mind crunch. The Overwatch League is brought to you by HyperX. Unleash your style, unleash your fury with HyperX Fury Memory. And by Coca-Cola, the official refreshment of the Overwatch League.
It feels like everyone's not listening to everyone else's calls, they just keep making their own calls again, like last time we played.
I think just in general, especially between fights, we can calm down in the tone. Like, as soon as he said that in game, I think our tone changed, and it was like, and now we're speaking like this, because we're in the planning phase, you know? So I think, yeah, especially when we're planning out, because there are a lot of fights, between fights where we have like 4 or 5 people talking with each other and we can't hear an essential call.
Yeah, during scrims only one person planned usually, but right now, maybe because it's a tournament, you guys are all, we gotta like push and pull, you know, we gotta push in. If they're gonna push you back, then you just pull back. Like, you don't have to just...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The goal should be just force Orisa gold, force the Reaper out, and they will have to fall back.
Get space.
Yeah, we just get space, and on our second set, we kill someone, you know? We don't look to kill someone like the Orisa the first time. We just push them out, force cooldowns, get space, chill, go again.
Well, that was an interesting look at what goes on during halftime for some of these Overwatch League teams. And Jake, I have to think that this has been a pretty interesting halftime for both of these teams, perhaps for different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's going to be much discussion going on in the Florida camp. I would expect more chairs of jubilation than anything else. They just got to keep a level head to win this series. But for Boston, you know, it's good to see that even in tough series, they can come together during halftime and have a cool, calm, and collected discussion, find their way forward on strategy. But one thing that I felt that piece kind of highlighted is the difficulty of the language barrier. You know, some teams, I think it really makes things harder for your team to connect and work together as one unit. It's not impossible. We've seen other teams succeed at it, which just begs the question of why it's been such an issue for Boston. It feels like just looking at the games, I mean, you can't know what's going on from an internal communication perspective, but it seems like communication is a critical issue for the team. That's what they even talked about on halftime. People talking over each other, everyone making their own calls, not listening, not finding that one voice to follow around. And that can be a real big challenge, especially in the Overwatch League. This is the level of play where it's not about an individual player making a mistake or playing poorly, but really it's about your team play execution being quicker and more decisive than the other team. You know, teams aren't going to let you just walk over them for a free win. They're going to go first, and they're going to make a play. So for both sides, you have to either be prepared to counter it or make your plan happen first. And I think when you're suffering communication difficulties, it's very difficult to do either of those things successfully. You have to be very, very quick and react all as a unit, whether it's going to be aggressive or a defensive play. So far, we haven't really seen much of that from Boston. To be fair, we haven't seen much of them at all. They've been in the spawn most of the time. So
yeah, courtesy of Florida at that. But our next map, it's going to be Dorado, and this makes me a little bit scared, Jake, because you think about some of the biggest spawn camps we've seen in Overwatch history. We've seen crazy spawn camps on Dorado. They can and do happen. There's two particularly notable times it's happened in Overwatch history, and I don't know. We could be heading for a third, depending on how much Florida wants to really flex on them here.
And for Boston's sake, for those players' sake, I hope this is a close match, or a close map at least. At the very least. If they get spawn camped on first, that would be pretty tragic, honestly. That would be... I don't know if I'd be happy about the series anymore. I just feel bad for Boston. But, you know, it's not about feeling sorry for them. You know, you got to give respect to Florida Mayhem, to be fair. After that first map being so dominant, they actually kept it up on map 2 when, you know, they easily could have given up first point. They easily could have backed off. They played with confidence and they stayed aggressive and they were able to close out on first point, which I'm sure puts heavy mental pressure on Boston. They've got to be feeling really bad just getting worked this series. So coming into this final map, I hope Florida keeps the pressure up. You know, that's what you want to see from these mid-tier to upper-tier teams that are trying to break through to that upper tier, rather, is that they keep the pressure on. Even they start a series strong. They don't taper off, let the enemy get a map or two. No, they finish it quick, 3-0. That's how you want to do it. Both for the purposes of map score and for the purposes of your confidence and your will to win as a team. You need to be that aggressive and decisive, not only in-game, but also across the whole series.
Also, as a competitor, I have to ask you this, where, of course, in your time as a player, you had matches where you were rolling and feeling good times, and also series where you're getting rolled. Is there ever a point where you just become numb to how much the other team is outplaying you? Like, do you have a series where you go, okay, it's just over, or do you think for the Boston players are still, like, really fighting to the very end? Like, give us an analysis of where the mental might be right now for Boston.
Well, I think this is the moment that is the true test for a team, right? It's very easy as a team, you know, if you're winning dominantly especially, but even if you're just getting the wins at all, to be happy and to be positive and to be supporting your teammates and continuing to fight in tough series. But if you're having such a rough season as Boston are now, and then comes along another game that is perhaps more brutal than any before it, that's pretty much the ultimate test of a player's mental. Because I agree, it'd be very easy to break down here, to start feeling internally like, wow, we just can't get a win, our team's bad. And to start having those negative internal thoughts. But the reality is that the series is still going on, you know, and as a player, as a professional, what's expected of you is that you're going to give 100% all the way through to the end. And it's not over yet. So from my perspective, I think it's up to the Boston players to regroup mentally and to focus, I think, less, in my opinion, on their strategy, their comps, and more on functioning as one unit. Like, whatever they play, I just want to see them being a little bit more decisive and executing as one unit, whether it's passive or aggressive. You know, they have to make the right choices, right? You can't just run it into Florida, get super aggro. You're not going to win that way. They're just going to be counterplaying you. But you need to make the right decision and respect it. And I feel like that's where Boston is lacking right now. They don't seem to have that one cohesive game plan. You know, someone's going in, somebody's backing out, Jerry's up on the flank, but then he's all alone and Gargoyle takes him down. You know, you have to be playing a little bit tighter than that in the Overwatch League. These really coordinated teams are just going to punish that sort of game style where you're relying on hero plays, essentially. So from my perspective on Boston, that's the number one thing, is they need to reset their mentals, decide who's going to be making the calls, who's going to be leading these team fights. I'd imagine it's got to be difficult for them with, you know, now you're bringing in Halo over Swimmer, and you know, not to say anything about those players' skill, but more so to think like you're changing the roster, you're having different voices, and on top of the language barrier, it only makes it more difficult. You know, I can't really blame Jerry looking for these hero plays. You know, he's playing McCree. That is sort of his job to get some pickoffs. But at the same time, Florida's just playing this Reaper rush strat, and they're stacking a 6, and it just feels like there's no opportunities for Jerry to pop off like that. You know, in order to beat Florida's composition, you kind of have to beat them at their own game, and that's where I think Boston has really struggled this series.
Yeah, and real quick, just to give a heads up on what's going on right now, there is a headset technical issue that's going on, so they're working through it. So we're just kind of sitting here speculating about the game and otherwise. And, you know, one interesting thing I feel like between the two teams is that you look at Florida, right? They're running a style of play that I think a lot of people look at and go, this is a little bit easier to execute, right? Where you're running into the other team, you're trying to be the aggressor. You know, it's about the closest thing you get to old school GOATs in terms of raw aggression, run at the other team. Boston, when you're running the McCree, you're running something that inherently requires a little bit more finesse, where you don't want to be engaged on immediately. You want to buy time for your McCree to find moments. But, you know, so far, it just feels like Boston has been up to the task. But we are going to take a quick break because of some of the technical difficulties. When we come back, Map 3 Dorado, heading right at you. And we're back waiting for Map 3 to begin, Florida versus Boston. And in case you're just tuning in right now, it has been a pretty one-sided series so far. Florida looking excellent. Boston really struggling for answers. And where we left off at the break, Jake, was talking about how Boston's been trying to run something that's a little bit more finesse. And it's been difficult for them because you look on the other side for Florida, they've just been running at them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also, you know, really the difference between these compositions, I wouldn't say one is necessarily easier than the other. They're quite similar compositions. But I think when you're going to run the D.Va and the McCree, that's just a playstyle that is all about individual playmaking, whereas you're running the Reaper and the Zarya, it's all about teamwork, team coordination. So you can see how both teams are playing to their respective strengths. You know, I don't hate it from Boston. If they're suffering on the team coordination side, they feel like they aren't winning that matchup with the Florida Mayhem. They try to make the game about individual playmaking. You know, put Jerry in a position to succeed. Brisson on the D.Va's got way more mobility. Maybe he can find some pickoffs on his own or make some big plays, you know, eating grabs, eating Ana cooldowns, etc. But so I don't hate the strategic look there from Boston, wanting to shift the game to more of a playmaking state as opposed to the team play state. But Florida's just way too good at imposing their will on the match. Especially on a map like Paris, it is pretty rough for that McCree and D.Va to get in the positions they need to be to succeed. We saw Jerry make that flank happen, once or twice, but it seems like he can only ever get one pick off on a backliner, and then ends up getting traded by Gargoyle pretty quick. So not really much Brusen can do about that, given the Zarya beam, of course, ignoring the D.Va Matrix. So strategically, I think I see what Boston's going for. Make the game about playmaking, focus less on the front line trade. They don't want him to take this Reaper mirror matchup that I think Florida is quite confident in. But at the same time, they just haven't made it work. At least not there, not on Paris. Could be better coming into Dorado. Could be better to bring out these lesser seen heroes like the Widow or the Hangzhou. Maybe play a comp without Mei, so you're really not focused on the frontline fight. But Mei is such an essential pick right now. That seems pretty hard to justify. And at the same time, you're going to a map where Hangzhou and Widow are better than we've seen in the series so far. Well, you're going to have to contend with BQB. And BQB's been by far, having great games on the Hangzhou, by far the best sniper so far. But, the only one actually playing a sniper so far. So maybe that's where Boston can compete. Put Jerry in an individual one-on-one duel in the Hangzhou. Maybe he can come out on top and create those advantages for his team. But you have to think Boston, you're not going to win that way. You're not going to win the series that way. You might be able to slip a map out with some big plays, but to win the series, you're going to need to step up the team play. You're going to need to be more focused on the front line, especially with Mei still being a dominant choice, just showing how critical it is to suppress those enemy Reinhardts, make them think twice about swinging their shield, and of course combo with the Graviton Surge. That combo, Grav, Blizzard, is pretty much unstoppable in Overwatch. Not really much you can do to survive it. 5-6 second CC on your whole team is pretty brutal.
Well, we've seen some highlights here from Florida, not really much from Boston, but as we sit here and wait for the technical side of things to settle a little bit, let's take a look at some of the best from Week 11. The wait is over, and the match about to begin, Florida versus Boston, where, again, if you're just tuning in, getting ready for the Battle of Texas later today, well, the first match here, it's been a little bit of a one-sided affair, where Florida has been looking dominant, Boston very much struggling, and now they have their final opportunity to try and keep this series alive.
Yeah, this is the last chance for the Boston Uprising. Make it work here, or it's all over. Florida Mayhem looking really clean so far. I really can't fault them for anything this series. It's been textbook Overwatch. Honestly, it might have been a little bit greedy to even go for that first point recontest. But as I was saying that, Florida makes me eat my words and they win it anyway. So, can't question a victory here, especially one as dominant as this. Going into Dorado, this is a very different map than the previous two. Nepal and Paris. I almost forgot what assault map we played because it was a little too quick. But Nepal and Paris both close range maps.
We do have a quick pause here. Perhaps something else has gone awry. But they were very, very quick maps, and the one thing that was unifying between the two maps is that Florida's execution was above reproach, where not only was their mechanical skill very good, but you look towards initiations. Florida had a game plan for how they want to engage with their Reaper composition to negate Jerry from getting opportunities on the McCree, and they executed it to perfection. Over and over again, they would just dive into Boston and set the terms, and they set the terms to 2 very quick control rounds and a first point hold on Paris that, frankly, was astonishing. Boston probably should have gotten point A.
Definitely, and I like the way, especially that the Mayhem played their attack round on Paris. Instead of taking either rotation down the left or the right corridor where you're pretty vulnerable to an initiation from defenders, Florida just like to get right up close under the defenders, but there's really no opportunity for Boston to get aggressive. They don't have a Zarya, they don't have a Reaper, they cannot fight in that sort of ultra close range engagement. No bubble for fusions, you can't just go jumping in like that. So it basically gets free value for Florida Mayhem. They get through the choke, hide at that unconventional close angle under the defenders, and the defenders are helpless. And by the time Florida resets all their cooldowns, they're ready to go again, and they just sweep the defenders out from that point. It's a quick cap. So as we go to Dorado, it's a very, very different map, as I was saying before. ColorX thinking about taking a shot on window, gonna elect to give it up. Interestingly enough, though, Florida electing to not run a May on the defense, not valuing it here. To be fair, there's not as many great chokes for the May wall. It can be hard to choke this. They use it on the first choke due to the cart breaking the May walls. So it's going to be all damage.
And perhaps good news for Boston is that they don't have to worry about a spawn camp quite the same way. Florida giving them at least a little bit of now Boston trying to go up this long angle. Florida's not really having too much of it. Looking for the pickup, but Ryan ending up on his own. Very good disruption for Boston with the boop to set that up. And with the early main tank falling, they're going to have to back up a little bit.
Yeah, this is pretty significant for Boston. Oh, and the Mayball to catch Gargoyle. His team needs to save him. He's so low, but great work by Guangzhou Jin keeping that Zarya alive. That would have been pretty much a first point cap, I think, if they found that pickup. Cherry trying to sneak through the flank here. Could get a lot of value, could get nothing. This is a classic Jerry play.
Well, go big or go home. You might as well take risks because it can't get any worse. Jerry finds anything on the flank, but he's discovered. Rolling back to his team while Florida trying to dive onto the payload. Ryan taking a lot of damage. He will back out, gets healed. Fusions. Shutter's up and ready. Drops it down, gets Gargoyle onto the ground. Gargoyle still well supported, gets the nano. That's one way to wake up after getting thrown down. BQB down. Uprising though, very, very low, getting forced back.
Gargoyle looking fearsome with his nano boost. Boston running for the hills. The Zarya can crush them all. Another massive sleep though by Myeonbong. High Noon to follow it up. This should be easy kills.
Jerry with the Deadeye gets a speed boost, gets 2, and Boston finding a window of opportunity. Now Florida in a much tougher spot. Still looking to delay a little bit. Chris is there. Yaki on the outskirts. Deadeye ready to go, but Jerry off to the side. Applying pressure to the side, but meanwhile, Florida's doing a decent job delaying. BQB though gives up his life, crying. Now going to be forced to move on in, and no, Florida, they just give it up.
Florida, they need to retreat right now. Getting picked up at this point would be pretty costly in terms of card pressure, but pretty impressive work by them to stall for so long without either tank. But it's all off the back of a massive sleep by Myeonbong. If he doesn't sleep Gargoyle there, I'm not sure they cap the point just like that. Jerry's High Noon only as successful as it was because the Zarya's on the ground, sleeping, cannot use her bubble, and of course, cannot protect her Rhine from getting frozen. So now, once again, Florida taking a quick initiation, fighting at this close range. Hex does have the Blizzard.
Off the Graviton. Florida, look for in, they drop the early beat. Boston in exchange, and Blizzard Boston slowing things down a little bit. Cryan ends up getting caught, can't get away. Now BQB to the back. Death Blossom finds Color Hex. Now both DPS for Boston down, and Florida still able to turn the fight, even as BQB gets smushed to the side.
And Nano even invested for Gangnam Jin, trying to keep BQB up. I think it didn't quite reach him in time. He would have survived that with a nano boost. So just not quite enough, but pretty impressive effort by Florida Mayhem. Boston's going to take the reset, going to be able to get back, start pushing card again, but they only barely won that fight, so they didn't really get the ultimate farm that you would normally get off of a fight win. So Florida still in a strong position as far as ults go. The bomb from Brucein going to be crucial this fight.
Uprising looking to get through was a very difficult point here on Dorado and point B. The man right now staying on top, biding their time from the drop down. Cryan, now is the time. Jerry already gets picked off, so they're working at 6-on-5. Cryan off to the side. The bomb gets Gangnam Jin. But Florida still doing so much more damage to the front line. Cryan hasn't even had the shadow. Was actually out of the fight for a good amount of it. And Fusion's caught off to the side, and that's all Florida needed.
Ooh, Yaki with a little bit of taunting. That's pretty impressive work by Florida. They lose their Ana early in the fight, which should mean that they have a really limited amount of heals. They should be going down quickly. They shouldn't be able to keep the fight going for long, but everyone just playing really effectively around Chris, and the Lucio heals end up being enough. So respect to Yaki, first picking off his counterpart and then running rampant in the backline. That's exactly how you want to do it in this McCree mirror.
2.5 minutes left for the Uprising. Not going to have the D.Va bomb in reserve, but if Florida drops down the wrong way, Fusions could be waiting for him. And now they immediately drop down. BQB already out of it. Cryan drops to a shadow, but answered by Fusions. Fusions had the answer, was ready for the drop down. And Boston, they have a real opportunity now to get point B.
Yeah, the wickets were split there by Ryan, looking for the two-man shatter, but instead gets nothing. That's a classic way to mess up as Ryan. You know, you think you can just barely get the double, but you wind up with 0. Maybe would have been better if he just solo shadowed that on and got the quick kill. Color Hex, though, denying the entry with the May, trying to spam this Yaki off the high ground. Yaki taking a lot of pressure.
Boston backing out. So Florida, they get to have a full 6 for at least one more fight here on point B.
Jerry's on the Widowmaker. Yaki knows it. He's hunting him right now. Whoever finds who here is going to be really, really critical. As Grab comes in on the low ground, here's the duel between Jerry and Yaki.
Both see each other, but Jerry's getting some help. Myung going long in the back. Yaki ends up falling. Now, both teams in on it. Gargoyle, Nano in on the front line, just finds Myung, takes him down early. And Florida, again, just dominating the front line battle before Boston can get a foothold.
Yeah, even though Jerry finds that starting pickoff onto Yaki, that fight was starting to look good, but Jerry couldn't really get anything else done, and there he's slept and teleported on. That's a pretty savage combo against Widow.
So Florida draining the clock. Boston at one point had nearly 3 minutes left to get point B. Now down to their final minute. And Jacob, 1 minute here. That's basically final fight territory.
Yeah, and the worst part is Brucein, he's not even back in his mech suit yet. So Florida just denying all this spam, just costing vital seconds here for Boston. They don't even want to really move in without that D.Va in suit. They know how risky that could be, but not really any ults to work with. They do have the self-destruct. Okay, that's pretty important, but oh no, this could be devastating. Florida setting up for a very aggressive rush here. Not sure if Boston knows where they are.
Like the concept, and you gotta look to Cryan. He's gonna be jumping off the top rope, ready for the shatter. Here he goes, going aggressively in. Early shatter, puts Myung on the ground, but Myung still well protected, gets Nano off in return. Fusion's now leading the other way. And Boston, a really nice re-engage off of dealing with Florida's trickery.
Yeah, I think the gambit from Florida there not really paying off, expecting Boston to come to high ground, but Boston instead moving quickly to cart ends up being a big payoff because Florida's not even ready to contest cart, and they end up being forced into a little bit of an anti-engage. Beat comes down from Chris, but it's pretty much entirely defensive on the beat, and that's not really what you're looking for. You want to be fighting those pickoffs while under the effect of the sound barrier. So Boston, to their credit, they're on third point now. This is a big deal. Yaki gonna switch over to the May, set up for that final fight territory, but Gargoyle's grab and Gangnam Nano boost could be pretty devastating here. Brucein pretty much needs to find an eat here, but I love the rotation from Florida, fighting on their terms in the low ground. Just grab on one though.
Yeah, they're coming from the flank, early grab, Cryan looking for the follow through on it, but it's not quite going as well as they might want in the beginning, but no, they get fusions in the end. Florida still very, very healthy, so even though Boston healthy opening okay, the fall through not so much.
Yeah, Cryan with the Nano boost, taking through absolutely everything there. Pretty much no way to burn a Ryan through Nano, at least given the comps that we're seeing here. With Brucein on the D.Va, you know, there's no Zarya, right? Gargoyle is doing so much in these fights. Pretty much uncontested, right? Like, that's the power of running the Zarya. The D.Va can make plays, can, you know, save your teammates, has that high mobility potential, but Zarya's high energy, she just outputs an unreal amount of damage, more than any DPS in the game. And oh no, Florida once again holding very aggressively at the chokes. I love this with the Reaper doing what they've done time and time again, rushing Boston with the Reaper, not letting Jerry get the space.
I think the concept for Florida here is if you take the initiative, you don't give it to the other team. Colorhex in danger! Gets bionated early, able to get the ice block off, almost fell before getting the blizzard off. Fusions had the early nano, mostly a survival nano at that. Florida right now holding strong, Boston still looking for the opportunity, and Jerry finds BQB! The exact pick that Boston needed, but Jerry pays a price for it. 5 on 5, now you look towards Amaze, Colorhex has blizzard, Yaki, not quite yet. We'll see what Colorhex is able to do here. Is Boston, they're getting good payload progress here for point C. Crying though! The shatter from the back! 3 immediately put down, but the beat is there. Halo keeps Boston in the fight. And now Colorhex waiting for a Blizzard to go Blizzard Team Blizzard, but it's too late! The earlier Blizzard from Yaki seals the deal.
Jerry flanking finds one, but instantly traded. That's going to favor the defenders, and then it's just a beautiful shatter from Karayan to set up that freeze. Sound barrier comes down, but you know, even sound barrier is not enough to protect you from a full duration May ult. That Blizzard is so dangerous in this mirror match. Bruce not able to find the eats in the Blizzard so far this series. Really, Yaki's been kind of doing whatever he wants with that, and it's looking really good for the Mayhem here. 2 points, but crucially, Boston, they don't get it around that final bend into last. That's a major difference on 3rd point. If you can hold all the way like right next to the final capture point, that's significantly easier to do than holding at the location that Florida was able to stop the card. So if Florida can make it to 3rd point, it's going to be pretty rough for the Boston Uprising to actually get a successful full hold. But you know, this map, we've seen spawn camps on 1st, we've seen holds on 2nd, so anything goes as far as the defense here. Jerry going to be starting on the Widowmaker though. Interesting. Didn't really get so much out of it last time, but still feeling confident, and you know, it kind of continues this theme for Boston where they're focused on the playmaking. They don't really want to take these team brawls, not going to run the Zarya. They're going to run the D.Va and the Widow. So these players need to make plays for this comp to win, to be clear. I mean, if everything goes as expected, everyone plays standard, then Gargoyle, Yaki, and BQB are just going to output more damage. It's up to Jerry to find a headshot. It's up to Brucin to isolate targets, get pickoffs, you know, mitigate key cooldowns. It's a bold strategy from Boston. We'll see if it pays off.
Well, the interesting thing to me is that Boston at least opened the door to potentially take the map, where they gave themselves hope. It was not a full stomping. Their offense did at least enough. But now we're going to the Boston defense. They're really looking to Jerry here to find an early pickoff. Meanwhile, the Mayhem, again, running something that's more close range, going to be looking to play around the sight lines early on. And for the Mayhem right now, Boston is giving up a lot of space.
Yeah, they're going to have to hold the choke here. Going to give Jerry this long angle, but it's difficult to land headshots. A lot of cover here for the attackers. Florida, pretty soon, I think we'll expect to see a rush out of them as they move on to Fusions. He's dropping low. Very low HP on Fusions. He's barely surviving.
Jerry able to find BQB, though. 5 on 5. Boston down to main tank, but Jerry's still a threat in the back. Florida losing a little bit of power to their front line. Jerry right now has to even it up. Colorhex is down, so it's just Jerry. Oh, no, Jerry takes Icicle to the dome, and Florida solidify their advantage here in the courtyard.
Yeah, Jerry finds BQB, but the pickoff on the Fusions is many times more significant. Without your Reinhardt, this comp pretty much falls apart. He's the key hero, needs to defend card, needs to hold those crucial chokes, and once Karayan is left uncontested, we've seen what he can do. I mean, always finding huge shatters, and this time, once again, significantly ahead on the shatter. I mean, Fusion survived a while in that fight, but he's pretty much jumping and juggling shield non-stop. If he stops doing that for 1 second, he'll be dead instantly. So he has no real choice in the matter, but that just means Karayan has a massive lead on shatter. And look at this as well. Karayan's pushing cart, but so many players on the high ground from Florida going to make it very awkward for Boston to drop in and stop the cart.
Yeah, Florida's just looking for the scrappy engage on the top, if possible. Maybe even taking away the option for Boston to simply drop down. Chris off on an adventure right now, looking for the boop off. He's been spotted, and now just has to very quickly rotate back. Was looking for the opportunity, not quite there, but here comes Boston. Early nano on the Fusions. Fusions dropping over, looking for Karayan. Karayan for now, shrugging it off. They get Gangnam Jin. Colorhex is able to find him in a little bit of the chaos. Now Boston trying to back out, trying to keep everyone alive in the situation. And Karayan overextends, they deal with Karayan. And this has been pretty good for Boston this fight.
Jerry getting so much value on the high ground right now. Beautiful shots from the McCree. That's exactly what Boston needs to stay alive in this match. Keep Brucin and Jerry on the high ground late into the fight. Let them get that long-term value. And it works out there pretty effectively, right? That's the power of the D.Va and the McCree. If they're enabled to just output damage, especially here on second point, to be fair, this might be the best spot in the whole map for this comp. if that McCree and D.Va end the fight on high ground, they're just going to be poking down into the heads of the Florida Mayhem, and there's not much the Mayhem can do about it. So Mayhem, they need to win these quick engages, taking out Fusions on the Rhine, possibly picking off Color Hex on the May. But it's easier said than done. Now it's Yaki and Gargoyle set up the combo to win this fight, potentially winning second point, but Brucein can put a stop to any of that. Just needs to eat one of these key combo pieces.
Florida again looking to evict Boston from the high ground, not wanting to be on the lower ground as they push. Jerry, early Deadeye, looking for spacing, looking for an early pickup. Not going to quite find the ladder. Boston still content to hold back. Florida having to push through a very narrow area. No, there's the shatter. Karayan immediately taking out Fusions and now just rushing into the Uprising. A great initiation, and this should give Florida second.
This is so painful. Mail invested from Color Hex, but gets completely denied. Ice Wall from Yaki protects all of his teammates. And worse than that, Gargoyle holds on to the grab. So confident in that fight, he hangs on to it. And you've got the Nano Boost now to combo. Give that Nano Boost to BQB or Karayan, and they're going to absolutely cleave through this grab. Halo, no sound barrier, so it's only the Nano Boost. So yeah, the Nano can protect one, but if Gargoyle finds a grab with 2 or 3 players, this map's all over.
4 minutes and 15 seconds left for the Mayhem to bring this one home. That's a lot of time for points. CJ, we'll see what they do with it. They go with the early Nano onto BQB in the back, gets stunned, but Jerry's already down. Still did okay damage off of that. The Graviton there for the fall through. BQB right there in the back. Brucein drops a bomb, trying to make any form of space, but it's nowhere near enough. The Mayhem push on through, and now the Boston Uprising, they go to emergency delay. Doomfist and Hammond out.
Yeah, it's going to take some serious hero plays here. Brucein just stalling the cart, but quickly frozen by May. May, one of the best anti-stallers in the game right now, so Halo dancing around a little bit. Doomfist comes in, but everyone's being wiped off. This is the series. Florida Mayhem take it 3-0. Beautiful stuff throughout. No faults, really, from Florida Mayhem. Boston just outclassed here.
I will give a little bit of credit to Boston where, okay, Florida still had a really quick attack there at the end, but Boston showed at least a little tiny sliver of life at the very end, even if it was not the biggest you could expect. I feel like at the end of it you go, we're going to ignore map 1, we're going to ignore map 2. Let's just focus on what happened for map 3 and go from there, at least the better parts of map 3, because other than that, you just look at it and you go, wow, Florida steamrolled us.
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple good fights there for Boston. One I would highlight would be Brucein and Jerry ending the fight on high ground, keeping that control and just raining in damage from above. Really did what they needed exactly to overwhelm the damage of the Zarya. But at the same time, Florida just adapt. Next fight, okay, we're going to come clear high ground. How do you like that? And Fusions, I mean, there's nothing he can do there. His shield is completely smashed when the Shatter comes down. There's literally no counterplay at that point. So it's kind of up to Jerry. I think Jerry popped his high noon a little bit early. But what can you really do? If you don't pop it early, it's a bit of a catch-22. If you don't pop it early, you might just get rushed down and not really get any value at all. And if you pop it too early, Florida just waited out. They've got a ton of clock, so not really finding the solution there. No Zarya means that Fusions is always going to be really behind in the shield trade if it's on even ground like that. So props to Florida Mayhem. Like, a couple fights don't go their way, and each time they make exactly the adaptation they need to get the win next time. So their shot calling looks great. Individual playmaking looks really solid, and teamwork as well. So can't fault the Florida Mayhem. We said this would be a test for them. They needed to win dominantly to prove themselves as, you know, a mid-upper table team, and I'd say they did exactly that.
Well, in a game focused on initiations, you got to look towards the player of the match, and for me, it was Karayan. Karayan leading the way for the Mayhem, and if you want to out-engage the other team, you need a Rhine on the same page, and he looked great today.
Yeah, especially I think the confidence to run that Rhine Zarya really gives your Rhine an advantage. But it's up to the Rhine to capitalize on it. You know, that's not free. But Karayan, he's swinging so much, playing so fearlessly, but managed to not really be slept too many times that series. That's one of the classic mistakes a Rhine can make, is going just a little bit too aggressive, getting slept, not reacting in time to those key cooldowns. But Karayan really didn't feel like he was getting caught off in that way. Maybe 1 or 2 shatters off the mark, but I mean, a pretty stunningly high shatter success rate, I think, this series. You know, not always finding the 5-man shatter, the team wipe shatter, but consistently finding a backliner, which is arguably the most important thing you can do. If you shatter an Ana solo, that's infinitely more important than getting a shatter on, let's say, both tanks. You know, to be able to put that Ana down means she can't save her allies. She's the hero who needs to save her allies from a shatter. So when you shatter her, it's basically a perfect play. Get the 1K and move on to win the fight. So Karayan, intelligent plays, working well around his team. No real issues with Karayan this series, looking really, really dominant here over Fusions.
Yeah, and I think for Florida, too, you talked about missions going into this game where, okay, I don't think a lot of people thought Boston was going to win here, but for Florida, they need to do more than just win. They need to dominate the show. Look, here's our level of skill here. We are so good that we will look at a team like Boston and we will trample them. And if we can trample Boston in this way, think about what we're going to do to you. And I think this is sort of what Florida needed to do, not only to get a win on the board, but sort of remind themselves, hey, they're a team that they feel they can compete for the top. And right now, when they're in the middle, look, you don't need too many wins in a row to suddenly change the narrative about, oh, you're a middle-of-the-pack team? Well, no, now you're a top team. So I think this was an important day for Florida just to come out that dominant.
Yeah, exactly what is expected of them, especially, you know, Florida, a team, I think most teams, it wouldn't be quite so significant how they do against Boston, but Florida's a team where we've seen high highs, really impressive coordination when they're playing at their best, and also some awkward matches where they just don't feel like they're playing at 100%. So I'm really happy to see that even against a weaker team at the bottom of the table, like the Uprising, Florida still looked really focused, really committed. Yaki spraying sorry on the ground. I don't think he's really sorry for that match, ZP.
No, that was the classic BM sorry. I mean, of course, it goes into it where anytime you're losing, you take any form of communication as BM from the other team. And Florida overall, I don't think they did it so much in terms of sprays, but just gameplay with how aggressive they were. You know, on one hand, you have confidence in yourself, but on the same note, I think you have a little bit of disrespect for the other team where BQB, throughout the course of the series, was just testing limits, going, just where can I go with this Reaper? What can I get away with and not get punished by your McCree? And the answer a lot of times was, you can do anything you want. So Florida definitely played with a bit of swagger today, I would say.
Yeah, you got to give it to them. It was a beautiful series, well played, and so teamwork heavy. That's exactly what I want to see out of Florida. This is a meta that is all about teamwork. So Florida's playing the most team-heavy composition. It's all about grouping up, focusing targets down as a unit, and they play it to perfection. Nice teleports as well from BQB, knowing when to set up a flank and when to just group up with his team. That's a crucial difference on Reaper with the new TP. You can pretty much TP every fight if you want, but it's not always correct and can be a little bit too telegraphed. So I like that BQB was changing it up, sometimes hiding in corners, other times initiating.
Well, of course, we are going to be getting a little bit more insight here. We got Zoe with Coach Kuki.
Thank you so much, CP and Jake, and congratulations to Kuki, to you and your team for another dominant performance.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. Now, first of all, you did have a rough schedule actually starting this season. However, it looked like every match you had to win, you actually did take the W, except from maybe the game against London. But overall, like, really good performance. How do you and your team feel about the performance so far? And do you think you have hit your ceiling yet?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy, and I think our whole team is happy about that. We have proven that we are improving this season, and we're different than last season.
I mean, you definitely are. This team has changed. It's a difference like day and night. Can you maybe walk us through what kind of changes needed to be made and how that impacted the atmosphere within the team as well?
I think it's about team coordination and team comms, and individual development, and yeah, I think we've been trying everything other teams do.
Right on. Well, whatever you guys are doing, it is working for you. If we're looking at the individual players then, who is especially standing out for you? Do you feel like one of the players has, at least this very season, really developed into a star player?
I can't pick one player because we are just trying to develop as a team, and everyone's doing a good job. Everyone's working very hard to improve. So
that's a perfect coach answer there, Kuki. I love it. Now you have a very unique perspective, really, in terms of if we compare you to other coaches within the league. You have been a former pro player in the Owl himself, and now you turned head coach. What were some of the most important things you felt a team needs in order to succeed?
That's a hard question.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was a player, I had a lot of thoughts of being a coach. Like if I was a coach, I would do this and that. I had some plans, and it was most of playing as a team and coordinating together. I think that's the biggest part.
Right on. I mean, your coordination and communication does look pretty spot on. Like, it is a very good synergy, at least from the outside, watching you guys play. What's it like behind the scenes? What's the situation like for the Mayhem right now? Are you all in the same facility, in a team house? What are you guys up to?
Yeah, we're in the quarantine, so we're just in our rooms, just like playing online.
How do you
Yeah.
keep the spirits up from everyone, making sure that they staying safe and sane during this time?
As a gamer, I think that's not a hard part. Just playing games in their houses. It's not a hard part being in their
Being
in
at
the
home,
room.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a big change for all of us, is it?
Yeah. I think the hard part is like being passionate and motivated throughout the long season when we just can't be on the stage. We're just being in our room playing. I
Right
think that's
on.
the hard part. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it is a very different scenario when you have fans and you can kind of take their
Yeah.
energy, honestly, as chat as that sounds. But yeah, so thank you so much for having a quick chat with us, and we wish you and your team the best for your future games.
Thank you.
And we are now heading into a very quick break. Afterwards, we will be back with the Battle of Texas, so stay tuned.